Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And a very warm welcome to Friday's edition. Yes, Friday already. Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. So, THR, the Hollywood Reporter, have confirmed that J.J. Abrams' Justice League Dark Universe that he was developing for HBO Max is now dead. Now, Justice League Dark is a very, very popular part of DC Comics. It involves very, very popular characters like Zatanna, Constantine, and Swamp Thing. So I kind of knew that Abrams' vision for Justice League Dark was dead as soon as James and Peter announced Swamp Thing as being part of DC Universe. And I'm very, very happy and excited about that project. Now, David Zaslav wasn't happy with Warner Brothers and AT&T's deal with J.J. Abrams and his Bad Robot Company from the very, very beginning when he looked at the fine print of that deal. It's a non-exclusive deal with J.J. and his Bad Robot Company, and it's a hell of a lot of money. It's the type of money you pay a production company and the person when you've got them exclusively. For example, David Zaslav has just ratified a very exciting exclusive deal with M. Night Shyamalan, one of the best writer-directors in the business. David Zaslav is earning his money. He's turning this company around. Make no mistake about that. He's the first person in the history of DC to actually implement a DC Studios. Think about that for a minute. He's making big, big changes for DC and WB. And make no mistake, what happens to WB and the decisions made for its future have also always got a knock-on effect for DC. So here on Movies TV Mad, when we're talking about DC, we will talk about Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers Discovery as well at the same time, because it's one in the same. What happens to one entity happens to the other. Make no mistake about that. So J.J. Abrams was developing a Zatanna movie or show. He was developing a Constantine of color. Yes, he was going to cast an African-American actor as Constantine. As we know, Constantine is white in the comics. And so, yeah, I don't think that David Zaslav is a big fan of J.J. Abrams. So what he's doing is he's getting him away from anything DC. Because to Zaslav, the way to make WB successful again and in profit again is to make DC successful. And he doesn't believe J.J. Abrams is the answer. Now, yesterday we read a report where J.J. Abrams is producing the Constantine sequel starring Keanu Reeves. Now, I don't think he's going to have much control in what happens in that film. I think what is happening now, JJ will make unrelated DC content for HBO Max. So I'm really happy with this decision. I don't want J.J. Abrams to be in control of the Justice League Dark Universe, but it's a very popular side of the DC Comics. And I do believe you really need to develop those Justice League Dark characters and universes, because I think they're very, very popular, and I think there's so many great things that you can do with them. And Swamp Thing is a very big part in the comics of the Justice League Dark team and universe. So that is, I think people are not talking about the announcement of a Swamp Thing movie enough. I mean, if you're a Swamp Thing fan, I'm sure you are a very, very excited fan right now. Now, I know jack shit about Swamp Thing. All I know is he's some kind of swamp monster. I don't know how it's a reality that there is a Swamp Thing monster, and I'm sure there's loads of people out there who can educate me about Swamp Thing. So please do, because when I don't know about things, when I'm talking about things, I like to know more about them. And I'm really lazy and I can't be bothered to research stuff. So if you have information about the origins of Swamp Thing, I'd like to know them. You can you can message me on my Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and let's be a bit of a team here. So I want the people viewing this channel to work with me, as well as, you know, watching the stuff and commenting, so we can be a team. After all, we're all fans of entertainment, TV and movies, and DC especially. So let's work together to create the best fan experience on this channel that we can possibly can. Because as I say, I do believe it's important that James Gunn and Peter Safran do develop Justice League Dark, and I believe the Constantine movie will flesh out that vision of the Justice League Dark characters and universe. I believe there's a possibility to have Zatanna in the movie, Constantine in the movie, and other characters as well. Look, it would have been great to see what J.J. Abrams would have done with Zatanna. I'm kind of sad that we don't get to see that Zatanna movie in a way, but in the end of the day, we know what direction J.J. was going to go in, and that isn't the kind of company that David Zaslav wants to create. Say no more, right? I also believe, and I think this is very important for DC fans to understand, I spoke about this a couple of days ago, or even maybe yesterday. Warner Brothers are launching a WBTV free streaming service. Now, free streaming services are the future of streaming. There will not be any paid streaming services, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years. What will happen is, instead of having, I think they will have the option to go pay monthly if you don't want the ads and sponsorships. But the thing is with streaming, I mean, ITV is a company over in the UK. They broadcast on terrestrial television, ITV1, ITV2, ITV3, etc. So they've got this brilliant new streaming service called ITVX, and it's basically run on sponsorships and ads. You can make more money running a streaming service on sponsorships and ads, kind of interrupting films and content and before and after content, than you can from subscriptions. And it's a really, really good idea, and I believe that this is the future of streaming. So with WBTV basically being launched as a brand new Warner Brothers Discovery streaming service, it's an interesting situation, isn't it? And what happens to HBO Max? Does HBO Max have a future? I don't believe that HBO Max does have a future. As I say, having these discussions is very important. It's all part of the DC conversation, by the way. I don't believe HBO Max has a future, because why are they launching a free service? I mean, it could be an alternative to HBO Max. I mean, listen, they always had HBO Go. HBO is a very successful outlet for WB. They make some really good stuff, as we can see from The Last of Us, Game of Thrones, House of Dragons. Everything they do is sensational. And the people working at HBO are absolutely separate to who works at WB. And you can tell from the difference of quality of content. You know, quality control at HBO is amazing. So the only thing I can imagine, the only way I can see HBO surviving is if it becomes an exclusive HBO streaming service, and I can see it happening. Now, last year, David Zaslav said that Discovery Plus and HBO Max would merge. He's now changed his mind, and that's not going to happen. A couple of weeks later, they announced a WBTV streaming service, so make of that what you will, because they're not going to be making films for HBO Max. This is not a Netflix, 2.0. This is why Batgirl was cancelled. Zaslav wanted it to go to movie theatres, as he wanted Blue Beetle to go to movie theatres, but it wasn't of the quality to jump from streaming to movie theatres. Now, Leslie Grace has been very, very outspoken. Recently, when Safran and Gunn announced the first half of Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters for DCU, Peter Safran very blatantly said that he applauds David Zaslav for shelving Batgirl because it wasn't good enough. So last week, Leslie Grace piped up and said, I saw a cut of the film. It was great. It could have been released. Which is very, very interesting. Who's right? Who's wrong there? Listen, it's been shelved. And I mean, I believe we will get a Batgirl in Brave and the Bold. I believe it will be a recast. I don't believe it's going to be Leslie Grace. So I do feel that the shit will hit the fan again once they recast Batgirl. Where do I sit on this? I feel sad for any actor who loses their job after doing the work. It must be terrible. But this is the industry. It's a change of leadership. They're going in a different direction. They don't fancy the Batgirl setup that Walter Hamada was creating. Basically, now you've heard rumours about a Batman, I forgot what it's called now. Basically, Bruce Wayne trains up a young guy to become the next Batman, if you like. So I forgot what it's called. You all know what it is, right? Anyway, so there was big rumours that they were making that film. Batgirl was that film. Instead of having a male person becoming Batman, Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne and Batman was going to train Leslie Grace's Batgirl up to replace him as Batman. That was the whole idea of that. So that's what it was going to be. Now, people won't tell you that. They'll say, oh yeah, well, they were doing it separately. No, they weren't doing it separately. That storyline was being done within the Batgirl movie. So Zaslav didn't like any of that, didn't like the fact that Keaton was the main Batman in the DCEU. Now it's interesting because I think when Zaslav came in, he very quickly came out and criticised the DCEU and said, although the DCEU has had a couple of hits, it's been too inconsistent. And he wasn't happy. So it was clear that there were going to be significant changes when he came in. Now, he was always going to structure a DC Studios, and we discussed yesterday how he saw Todd Phillips as the right person to take control of DC Studios. Todd Phillips said no. And there was this whole Dan Lin saga, wasn't there? Dan Lin rejected it, apparently. And then you had, like, over at WB Pictures, you had Mike DeLuca and Pam Abby, like, green-lighting A Man of Steel 2, bringing Henry Cavill back. And then all of a sudden, and it's interesting, isn't it? I think Zaslav is kind of happy to change his mind if he feels uncomfortable with situations. I actually think this is a really, really good asset to have as a leader. You don't want a stubborn leader who says, this is the course we're on and we're not changing. Because if you see something that's not working, you have to do something about it. So he saw the red flags in bringing Cavill back for A Man of Steel 2. He obviously saw the red flags within the Black Adam box office. He said, no, we can't carry on like this. He likes Cavill as Superman, but he could see this is not where the money was at, and they needed to construct some kind of new franchise. So obviously, he either went to Gunn and Safran, or Gunn and Safran came to him. What do I think happened? I think Gunn and Safran went to him, and he liked their foresight, their vision for DC Studios and their DC universe, and being able to take what Walter Hamada was doing with Flashpoint and kind of use the Flash movie still to create a new timeline and a new universe, but do something dramatically different. And Zaslav liked that idea. So I believe that Zaslav wanted Mike DeLuca. After Todd Phillips turned him down, I think Mike DeLuca was going to be the CEO of DC Studios. And I think he changed his mind. It's kind of simple. And once he changed his mind, and once Gunn and Safran came in, you know, it was over for Henry Cavill, and it was absolutely over for the DCEU. Now, what was Mike DeLuca going to do with DC? I think ultimately they were going to be very, very faithful to the actors that Zack Snyder brought on. I don't know how different DeLuca's plan would have been to Walter Hamada's plan. I'm guessing if Henry was coming back, so was Ray Fisher as Cyborg, and Gal was going to continue. Now, it would have been interesting to see if he kept Wonder Woman 3 going, directed by Patty Jenkins and written by Patty and Jeff Johns, and it would have been interesting to see what he would have done with that, Mike DeLuca. So I don't necessarily think Mike DeLuca was a bad idea, but I think he was going to go along the same lines that had already been structured already, and just keep the DCEU as the DCEU, but, you know, have a Justice League, have a Man of Steel 2, you know, have a Cyborg movie and stuff like that, and just carry on making content for the old DCEU. The problem with that is, and some people will disagree with me, that simply didn't work financially on the level they needed to. They need to create something that makes so much money, because potentially DC can make over $1 billion a movie if it's done properly. And it was making nowhere near that. So you've got to take the emotions. As a leader, you've got to take the emotions out of the situation. Snyderverse fans are emotional, understandably. I'm emotional about Superman, understandable. But we are not the CEOs of a big conglomerate. You know, we're just fans. And at the end of the day, if they lose money, we'll bitch and moan and laugh at them. But we have no consequences. Of course it hurts us when a DC project fails and the latest kind of rewriting of a DC franchise fails. Of course it hurts us, but it doesn't hurt us as much as it does them. It fucks them over financially, and then you get new leadership again and again. So it's very important that they make good, solid decisions so they can carry forward, so they don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And that's why James Gunn and Peter Safran are there. So even though I like Mike DeLuca, I would have been excited to see Henry reprise his role in A Man of Steel 2. I think ultimately the direction we're going in now is the best way forward. Now, if the Snyderverse could continue somewhere else, or on HBO Max, or on the new WB TV, I'd be happy about that. We'll see what happens in the future. It's pretty clear that James Gunn wouldn't be one who'd want to ratify that universe continuing. But I've explained this before. James Gunn and Peter Safran may be the co-CEOs of DC Studios, but basically their remit, their kind of, I don't know what to call it, you know, like a sheriff, you know, jurisdiction, yeah. Let's talk about what Gunn's and Safran's jurisdiction is. It's the DCU. The DCU is basically replacing the DC Extended Universe, the DCEU, and it's its own connected universe. That's where the line's drawn. Now, yes, James Gunn will have meetings with people like Matt Reeves, so they can make sure and they communicate, and they don't basically, so you don't have the same villain in Batman 2 as you have in James and Peter's Brave and the Bold. That's the point of their meeting. It's not necessarily meaning that James Gunn and Peter are in charge of all the decision making. Now, Constantine 2 was greenlit by Mike DeLuca and Pam Adby at WB Pictures because there was no James Gunn and Peter Safran. There was no DC Studios at the time. So that's why that happened. Now, we're going to see moving forward what DC Elseworlds is. Has it just been created to house the Batman and the Joker franchises so people don't misunderstand what those universes are? Or will they greenlight other projects in the future? At the very least, having it there gives you a space to do that in. Now let's go back to J.J. Abrams, who's also producing the Ta-Nehisi Coates written Black Superman movie, which is in active development. Active development basically means that you've written a script, you've shown it, the studio don't like it. You've gone back, you've rewritten the script. The studio don't like it. So that's what's going on with that movie. So basically, Ta-Nehisi Coates is rewriting that script again. I just can't imagine it with the worldview that David Zaslav has, that he will allow a black version of Kal-El and Clark Kent. I believe there could be an exciting possibility if Ta-Nehisi Coates was interested to do a President Superman. Val Zod, we were going to get a Val Zod Superman series on HBO Max. Now, nothing's been officially said about that, whether it's cancelled or whether it's going forward. As you can see, they really take their time in cancelling projects. But Michael B. Jordan was going to be heavily involved behind the scenes, and probably he would have played Val Zod as well. But in all the slate announcements, the Val Zod project hasn't been announced. That basically means that is not happening. And because basically a couple of weeks ago when James and Peter made their announcements and told us what's in DC Elseworld and what's in DCU and their plans, basically they said that the Black Superman movie is in active development, but they didn't even mention the Val Zod movie, which basically means it's not happening. And there's a couple of things that the old leadership greenlit also that weren't even touched on. They weren't put in DC Elseworlds, they weren't put in DCU. So I think it's pretty safe to say that anything that hasn't been put in DC Elseworlds thus far or DCU isn't happening from the previous leadership. And I think that's important to understand. So I think the Val Zod project is dead. Now, personally, again, I think this is a great shame, because I do think that Val Zod, I mean, I love Kal-El, I love the OG Superman, but I do believe Val Zod has probably a better origin story in terms of commentary with mental health and mental illness. Val Zod suffers with mental health problems. He basically can't leave indoors. He's hiding away. He's got big issues, and I think it would, if you read the comics, I think you'll find that you'd really like Val Zod's Superman. He's a very interesting character. That's the kind of representation and inclusion that I want to see, everyone. I want to see the black Superman and the black DC characters that already have history in DC Comics given the live action treatment. I want to see Asian superheroes created for DC. I want to see Latino heroes created for DC. Original ones. Now, these days, everyone's going to say, that's so woke, that's so woke. Well, you've got to ignore that, right? We want to see, different kind of minorities getting a looking. But you've got to make them, you've got to put the effort in that you do with the white superheroes, right? So it's like the female superheroes. You've got to put the effort in. You can't just say, ooh, it's a female, so we don't really have to make it entertaining and interesting. No. Because that's actually sexist. This is what happened with the female doctor, Jodie Whittaker. No effort was made to basically make her the doctor. She's a woman, she's there, that's all we need to do. That isn't good inclusion, that is sexist. Basically, that's sexist, that's racist, and basically all it is just to say, ooh, look, let's pat ourselves on the back. We gave one of them a job, right? That's the problem with the industry today, and this is why there's been a line drawn between the fans and creatives in Hollywood, because they just want a virtue signal, and we want people represented and included properly, and we don't want all this bullshit conversations during the marketing, calling people racist, like the Bro Movies guy called people homophobes for not going to watch, the Bros movie. I just think it's embarrassing at this point. We can have equality, we can represent and include, but entertainment must be put first. And if you're not willing to write an Asian superhero with depth and a great backstory like the ones you do for the white superheroes, right, that is kind of racist. That is lazy. You're just throwing them in there. It's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe being very, very lazy with its representation and commentary, and people can see through that, and they're being exposed. And they talk about kindness and compassion while they treat VFX artists like shit. So be better. You've got to be better. There's a great opportunity here for DC. I genuinely believe under the banner of DC Studios we are heading for a very, very exciting future. I do believe in James and Peter's vision because I believe that James knows there's a problem within superhero content right now. And he said it during the build-up and marketing to the Suicide Squad, where the veneer has become too predictable and too basic. And I think his DC Studios and Peter's DC Studios and the DCU will be very different than people expect. And with the DC Elseworlds banner, I think there's an opportunity to create a universe of variety, different universes in DC Elseworlds. Have this connective tissue in DC Universe, and I think that's very important. But does the Justice League Dark from J.J. Abrams' universe being disbanded mean that the Black Superman movie doesn't really have a chance? Because the Black Superman movie was greenlit by other people, the previous leadership. We now have a new leadership. So it's going to be a very, very interesting situation. As I said on the top of the show, David Zaslav isn't happy with the J.J. Abrams deal, and he's done his best to fix the damage of that deal. He's giving Abrams non-DC kind of like TV shows on HBO Max and just running down that deal. There's no question, once he runs down that deal, it won't be renewed. It's really a shame with J.J. Abrams. He started off as one of the best creatives in the business. He co-created Lost. He created Alias, a brilliant spy thriller starring a female lead, Jennifer Garner, one of my favourite shows of all time. He co-created Fringe. He was really on a great direction, but unfortunately he went on a different direction and really ruined his reputation with the consumer as well. And I think when he was first coming into WB, I think we were really excited. There was rumours of him writing and directing a Superman movie, which would have been great, because he did write a Superman movie, Superman Flyby. And I've read the kind of details of that, and it sounds a very interesting take. In fact, kind of similar to Man of Steel, but also very different, because Krypton isn't destroyed in this story. I've always kind of liked the idea of changing up the destruction of Krypton and having Kal-El go back to Krypton at the end of the movie and see what happens in the sequel. So J.J. Abrams used to be someone who cared about storytelling. He became a businessman with his fingers in too many pies, and ultra extremist political. And that's what happened with him, and that's a shame. A lot of these people who used to care about entertaining us don't care about entertaining us anymore, and they've damaged their own industry. The streaming platform is dying a slow and painful death because most of the entertainment is too bland. And when streaming started, when Netflix started, it was interesting because basically we were watching old movies on Netflix originally. And, we were binging our favourite TV shows originally. Then they started making their own content. And now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great content on Netflix, but not much of it is that rewatchable. So I do believe the future of DC is going to be broad and exciting. I think DC has a better future than Marvel. If you look at what's going on at the MCU now, Feige's already said that he's going to reduce the MCU Disney Plus shows because apparently they're not doing too well they don't get in the top 15 of streaming shows anymore. So Marvel's been fucked up. So they're going to take Marvel back to movie theatres because they've been forced to. Basically, when AT&T were running Warner Brothers, they wanted to basically kill off the theatrical system and do everything via streaming, and so did Disney. But since COVID has kind of subsided, and it's pretty clear that we need the theatrical business, and we don't want to kill off the theatrical business. Nothing better than going to watch a movie in the cinema, right? I love it. You love it. We're going to go and watch the Flash movie on the biggest screen possible, and that's better than watching it on my TV. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to watch the Flash movie on my TV. A few months after it's been in the movie theatre, I'll buy the digital copy, I'll buy the Blu-ray, I'll buy the 4K. I always do that. And I'll be proudly watching it on my, my Dolby Atmos TV. Of course I will. But we don't want to kill off the cinematic business. And David Zaslav has come in and said, no DC movies on HBO Max. And I think that is the future of DC. And I think the future of DC is in good hands, in the hands of David Zaslav. This has been Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.